This is special episode of Oops, I'm in a Cult. We are doing letters from listeners, number 3.
No, this is only the second one, isn't it? Or is it the third one?
Number 2. Number 3. No, number 3. Because we did the one, and then we did the other one that was half
Babylonian toilet paper.
Babylonian toilet paper, which was like, it was
Those were the good old days.
good old days, back when we were still innocent.
Before we knew that toilet paper was from Babylon. Oh,
My butt hasn't been the same since.
Welcome to the whatever podcast this is.
Are we going to change the title, or are we good with?
we love Oops, I'm in a Cult.
What is this podcast about, though, Charity?
John Robert Stevens.
The Living Word.
The Walk.
It's cults. It's cons.
And corn. He says, and I think the girl in your YouTube videos is your dear wife. Am I right? I hope she also understands who Jesus is. You guys, I'm not a co-host.
The girl.
I'm just the girl in Scott's YouTube videos.
She's not a co-host.
Not a woman.
The girl in my YouTube videos.
And I must be your wife, because what other purpose would I serve?
Why would a man and a woman occupy the same space if they aren't married? That's nuts. You're going to watch as 2 former cult members try to de-dumbify themselves by doing a podcast about the cult that they were involved in their entire life.
Thought it was a church, turned out it was a cult. Oh, there's a good tagline.
That's what it is. That's it.
Oops, I'm in a cult.
Okay.
Letters from listeners, whatever episode it is, we don't know. But
yeah, this one is not themed in any way. This is letters because it's been a while since we've done one, so we've kind of just pulled in a lot of stuff that we've had written over the last little bit, and we just want to read them along because like it's so fun hearing these little stories inside and out, and just getting little windows into different time periods and different places. So do you want to read this first one there, Charity?
Sure. Okay. This person did wish to remain anonymous, but they said, I am a former peripheral cult member. I married into the Santa Barbara church. They put church in quotes, which I love, back in the 90s. My wife was a 45-year member while I white-knuckled it on the sidelines for 24 years. I especially enjoyed the current episode about Gary Hargraves squirming his way through a deposition. I hope this grifter pays dearly for the damage he's unleashed over the past 40 years. I am a professional musician and spent several years playing in the worship band in the Valley Church on a part-time basis. I got on Rick's radar and accepted his offer to join the band, mainly so I could avoid sitting in the congregation listening to Gary's droning voice.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's like, they avoided, this person like avoided, sitting in the it was kind of the same thing that I did with the audio booth, except for like the whole job was to listen to Gary's voice, but I didn't have to like participate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could kind of tune it out and like,
yeah,
up in the dark booth. So he goes on to say, I was not a member of Rick's posse, although he tried to reel me in several times. I politely kept him at arm's length because something about him creeped me out. And the way all those other guys in the band, some of whom I thought were okay, used to fawn over him. Ugh. Recently, I was cleaning out our garage and found some boxes of a bunch of Living Word stuff. My wife told me to get rid of it all, so I gleefully disposed of hundreds of this week's CDs and cassettes. Ooh, I had that moment too.
Yeah, well, I'll forgive him because I have plenty of copies now.
I know, Scott's always like, don't throw away your stuff, and we need it. There were also a couple of Centers of Learning yearbooks. So Centers of Learning, again, folks that weren't in this shit show, was the church-related school. He says, I rifled through one from 1988, and the first page I randomly turned to had a picture of Rick and his second wife. On the second page, I randomly flipped to, it was a picture of Rick's future fourth wife. Yikes and yuck.
Yeah, especially since that fourth wife in the picture, and they attached the picture, which we will show. Well, no, we won't show, actually. But that fourth wife that he's referencing there was a child in the school.
Yeah.
While Rick was married and part of the school staff, or as part of the board of directors, I think is the reason that he was in the photo.
It is really creepy.
Full adult. She was a little baby child.
Like kindergartner is what she looked like. Ugh. He says, I've attached the pics for no other reason but to share the creep factor. You're welcome. Keep up the great work. It must not be easy exposing yourselves to this triggering material every week, so I applaud you for your willingness to do that.
Gross.
Not surprised that Rick tried, anybody who had some kind of in the industry, Rick would try to lure into his posse for his own selfish gains.
Yeah.
So good for this guy for not falling for that bullshit.
Yeah. Glad he got out.
Okay. So you want to read this next one? This is,
I'm going to read this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Centers of Learning and Reading Comprehension put to the test. Here we go. I vividly remember having friends that had to call their relationships to hang out with me outside of church and was called back frequently saying they couldn't, their relationships being their designated relationships. So this person was saying that their friends had to check in with their shepherd's designated relationships to see if they could hang out as friends. And then they go on to say, and their relationships were all kids or young adults, not much older than us. Being adjacent to the church was a separate torture. You're inside enough to go to family meetings, but you're so outside, everyone on the inside hates you because of all the torture they're going through. You're quote, so lucky you don't have to deal with this like we do. And when that's all you know from birth, dude, it's the most heartbreaking shit to navigate. I've seen so many relationships get broken up and reassigned that had nothing to do with how the actual couple felt. It was well known to all of us kids from the time of puberty, if you dated within the church or found an outside partner that was brought in, that you would be shuffled around constantly in pairings. I had no concept of what normal dating looked like growing up. So many people in their 20s and 30s were dating my teenage friends, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. It was like the end goal of their bullshit was to just see how presentable a couple would look like to the fellowship.
Yeah, so this is just like exactly what we had to go through with the dating process. Being a part of the cult was just like anytime you'll hear it in other interviews, like on Snapping Out of It too. And it's just such a common theme is like anytime you wanted to date someone, the answer was always no. Mm-hmm. Unless it was somebody that like they miraculously approved of. And then you'd be like, well, actually, I'm not really into this person anymore. And they'd be like, well, too bad. You're going to fucking marry them.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, as I said, it's like, yeah, like how presentable a couple you would look like to the fellowship. Like, did you fit? That's what always like control of stuff is. And especially control of relationships, like matchmaking and things like that. It's like kind of like, how does this benefit us? You know?
Yeah, it's not about, again, not about the people. It's about how does this fit into the mission.
Yeah. Didn't she then talk about like trying to do that? What is this next little bit?
Well, she was friends with a guy who was really involved in the church. And you know, it's kind of that thing of where you feel like you're living two lives sometimes when you're trying to be apart and be presentable, but deep inside, you just feel like this isn't working for me. It's like you're real depressed. So he was confiding in her, and she says about him, like, he clearly hates women who aren't interested in him in a God-honoring, girls turn it off context. And on the other hand, praises me for being a, quote, honest slut. He opened up about hating all of his male friendships in the church, too. How fake they were when he was going through a hard time. How empty it felt.
Oof.
That line.
Yeah. I think that there are plenty of people that came out or went through it or whatever with like really actual real relationships. But I can see that same thing that they're saying. That's like because of the synthetic relationships that they create, like that fake designated relationship, that fake stuff, you would just end up with a lot of like shallow friendships and relationships that weren't real because you weren't allowed to be honest.
Yeah. And then it's like, if you stopped doing what they were doing, as i.e. being involved in the church, then they just disappeared.
That's right. Well, glad that's over. Next. What's this next one about?
This was someone like that was a member a long time ago that we never knew.
Yeah.
You know, because we're so young.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So this guy says, hello. First off, thank you for the podcast. I wish this was around 35 years ago. I blew out in 1989 and moved to several different states to get away from this toxic belief system, which poisoned my home. I was 18 at the time. My attendance was sparse, starting at the age of 15 when I got a job, which allowed me to work up to 38 hours a week, a good excuse to stay away. I knew I had to leave after my girlfriend, a member of the organization, and I were counseled by the brothers. We had to report back after our dates with details of our time together. My mom arranged a one-on-one with the pastor to counsel me due to my lack of interest in their caca del toro. That's bullshit, everyone. I moved shortly thereafter. It was rumored he was deposed after it was discovered he had a harem. We also attended many home meetings studying the Word of John through his manual entitled The First Principles. I just remember the last chapter was called something like The Whore of Babylon, i.e., everyone in the religious world, or maybe the entire planet, but us, the true remnant. My favorite memory from this time period involves what we called a Jubilee service, which involved tambourines, electric guitars, raised hands, and loud worship. At one point, there was an offering. People started throwing money in the air. My buddy and I collected as much coin as we could. We informed his dad about our most righteous haul. He took us out for pizza and a movie. It was awesome. Good times.
Well, I'm glad some of that offering money actually went to a good place instead of the Living Word. Yeah.
Exactly. We attended the church in Casa de Oro, Spring Valley, California during the mid-70s until the death of John. John Robert Stevens visited our branch, and it was rumored he gave a directive to cut down the large white cross outside of the church. The cross was sawed down. I remember there was a long procession of children waiting to get blessed by JRS. He would speak a word over their life. Somehow I missed out. I attended school at this facility from 76 to 82. After John died, this church chose not to follow Garolin. Garolin is what they used to call Gary in Maryland. It's like, Benifer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The pastor, who he names, became a Methodist minister at some point. I spent an inordinate amount of time in his office for various infractions. I would have loved to know this guy. He sounds like a good time. My family stuck with it, and we attended services at the former Kanaya Church, which became the Living Word Fellowship Church. I remember visiting in LA in 1984 for the Gary and Marilyn marriage tour, where they blasted Eye of the Tiger in celebration of their union. I remember that too, for the Shiloh leg of the tour.
What?
I was real little, but yeah, I remember that.
Oh my God. They did the same song in each one. They're like, that was really great in San Diego. They did a marriage tour. I mean, just even that in and of itself is like weird. And then to have like the same song on rotation at every single one. I wonder if they got the rights for that so that they could play it.
It's just like such celebrity bullshit. Like you're pastors, bruh.
Before you do the takeaways, I want to just there were a lot of things in those last, like John Robert Stevens visiting the branch and saying like, cut down the large white cross outside the church. The Living Word did not have a lot of typical iconography of, thank you. Yeah, it works. Of Christianity. Like we didn't like, that's what's like really funny about it too, is like when you could tell, like, especially someone growing up in it, like when you look at other Christian churches and they have those crosses, or people say like, dear baby Jesus and things like that in their prayers, it's like this stuff was like didn't fit in the Living Word Fellowship culture. Not sure why.
The Lord in reference to Jesus. The Lord.
Yeah, it wasn't really Jesus. It was the Lord. It wasn't even.
Is that different than God? Like,
no, it's the same. I think like if you drill down, like technically, it's all they knew, but they would say the Lord, not Lord Jesus, just the Lord.
Because that's what I always thought. The Lord was Jesus, and God was, like the Heavenly Father.
I mean, yeah, but they're like, there's also the same. Anyways, that's a different discussion. The other thing I thought was interesting is the Jubilee service stuff with the tambourines. That was like a certain like movement time. I see the in the tapes. And also we heard from like one of our first episodes was with Lenny, and she talks about playing the tambourines and like being the first one to like among the first to like play tambourines and stuff. That was all in that Jubilee, which must have been wild. Okay, what are his takeaways?
So his takeaways from my experience are as follows. 1, all these whack jobs employ emotional coercion and manipulation to keep people in a tailspin. True. 2, all the leaders have a very, very low signal to noise ratio. Their so-called prophetic utterances are incoherent. And that was it. Those are 2 takeaways.
Yeah, I think that's really funny. The so-called prophetic utterance were incoherent. Yeah, I know. That's what we analyze here. That's what we do. We play them all the time and try and like, especially Marilyn. That's the one we make fun of the most.
Sometime we gotta find an excuse to play that cassette that we listened to a couple months ago where she's just going on. It was at the beginning of her reign.
You're going to have to be way more specific, Charity.
It was like, remember where I was just like, oh my God, she's even more incoherent than I've ever heard her before in the beginning, where we were sitting at the kitchen table
that's
when
right.
we were editing, doing the deposition stuff.
What was
What
that
was-
one? It
I don't
was
know,
like
from,
a,
84 or something.
oh, it was right after John died. And
Yeah.
it was about continuing the mission and what we're supposed to be doing. But she literally talked for like, that is a theme with these motherfuckers. It is just talk for a long time. And you're just like, what are you trying to talk about? Like normally we are able to figure it out with context, but we were listening to this one and didn't know what the context was. And so we're just like, she's not saying anything, like literally anything. Anyways,
Yeah.
prophetic utterances. We're more uttering than prophetic.
More uttering than prophesying. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to read this one? This is we're doing doing someone a solid here because this is interesting because she's on the look
Yeah.
for a family
This is
member,
someone-
a sibling.
Yeah. So this person wants to be referred to as Maggie. And that's important because it's part of the trying to find their sibling. So Maggie writes, I came across your podcast recently, which has reignited a search I've been on for the past 9 years. I found out in 2015 that I have a half sister who my mother gave up for adoption at birth. This led me down the path to find out that my mother was in the Living Word Fellowship in the 70s in both Phoenix and Burbank locations. She would have given the baby up for adoption while actively in the church. My mom hasn't given me a lot of information, but one thing she has told me was that she had the baby in LA and that her church helped support her during that time. I have reached out to people I found on a cult forum who were in the Living Word Fellowship during the JRS days, and they have helped paint a picture of what my mom's reality may have been like. Because of what my mother has said and what those who I have talked to have said, I believe the church leaders had a heavy influence on her decision and most likely had a hand in the adoption process. I believe my sister was adopted within and possibly raised in the cult. The only information I have about her is that she was born on July 17th, 1975 in Los Angeles. I reach out to you to ask if there's any way you could help me in my search. Perhaps you know someone who would be a helpful contact, or if you're willing, put something out to your followers. So that's my hope is to connect with her and see if she would like to meet me and my siblings. So
Wow.
if you know anybody, if that makes any sense, I guess send us an email. We'll try and put you in touch with
Yeah.
Maggie.
That's
that
intense.
would be really
Like,
cool.
that's-
I know.
Yeah. And it is another example of how controlling the church was. Like they
Yeah.
would have they encouraged abortions, they encouraged giving children up, they all of that stuff.
Yeah, they got involved in all of that. And, I don't, from the various levels of like what someone needs at a different time in their life, but it's all, it's all fitting. They did a lot with family planning, let's say.
Family planning, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ready for
those
this
of
one?
us that, I was about to say something about being,
We'll undo it.
what is it JD Vance called us? Like depressed, childless cat ladies or...
Oh my God.
When you said family planning, that just popped into my mind. Anyway, this is from another former member who says, I found your podcast recently, and initially I wasn't interested for many reasons, including the fact that I left the church a long time ago and felt like I came to terms with many things many years ago. But I began listening and watching recently and found the content quite gripping. I've watched several episodes, laughed and cried, and realized there are maybe some things I haven't fully processed.
Somebody did laugh, Charity, see?
Oh, we are funny, yay! We're not sure if we're the only ones that think we're funny, like to each other. Write us in, tell us if we're funny or not.
We
No,
all know
actually
you're
don't.
crying. We understand that.
Yes, but do we make you laugh also?
This is an interesting question. Okay, go ahead.
She says, but I watched the interview with Johanna and it made me think of a psychological concept known as pluralistic ignorance. You may be familiar with it, but if not, it is essentially when you are in a group setting and if you see something that seems wrong or upsets you, you'll look to the group for validation, inwardly and implicitly, not externally. And if the group seems to think the situation is not worth commenting on, and the victim even seems fine, you think you must have gotten it wrong. It's a sort of self-gaslighting based on the reaction of the group. But the reality is that others in the group might be noticing the same things and also thinking their thoughts and observations are not valid, which is why discussing these things is so valuable. So thank you for your work and for doing the podcast.
Yeah, that pluralistic ignorance. Yeah, that's what we've seen that a lot, because you keep hearing that from people. Now they're like, I'm sitting in the audience and I was thinking this thing and I thought it was so crazy, but I didn't say anything. And then they go to continue be a part of the church for the next 10 years with all these crazy things happening. And they're looking around and no one is reacting. People are being supportive of it. And so you just like go along with it. And then all these years later, we're finding out that like a bunch of people in the audience was all looking around like, am I the only one here?
I mean, that's totally like how it was when Rick married his fourth wife. I've had like so many people were like, the fuck? But then you just don't think everyone else is chill with it. And so you go like, well, I guess I should be chill.
I'm the crazy one. Yeah.
I'm the crazy one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. She goes on to say, I thought of another relevant psychology concept that highly intersects with what many of the guests on your podcast describe as people-pleasing. The concept is fawning, where an individual copes with rejection or threat by appeasing whomever offers the threat. Because the response to disobedience or lack of submission could be so drastic, there were few options aside from fawning for individuals who could not or did not want to leave the community. Boy, I still deal with this. I do that.
How so?
You know, they say it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I do sometimes fight. I do sometimes freeze, but I notice that my default is in the fawning, the people pleasing, like, oh, I'll make you happy again. Like, I'll take back whatever I said or did or whatever, and just like, oh, no, okay, sure. Or I'll back down, you know?
Yeah. You feel like you can fix the situation by patching it all back up and being like, no, it was actually fine the way it was. Never mind. I didn't mean to poke holes in this. Like, you're actually beautiful and perfect and everything is great.
Appeasing that person. I have a great example of that. Do you want me to share?
Yes, please.
I remember I talked about that yoga teacher I had that was just such a horrible man. He was such a dickhead.
Yeah.
And he was always picking on me, and he just yelled. He just like laid into me one day, like pulled me aside and was just yelling at me. And like, why are you always questioning me? Why are you?
This was like right after you left the church or like on your way out or something?
It was when I was wanting to leave the church, but like couldn't yet. It wasn't.
So you're looking for another cult to join, and this guy was doing a great job. Yeah.
I was so reactive to him because I was like, this motherfucker's a cult leader. And like he wanted to be like worshipped, and he gave himself this like name, like a guru would give somebody a name, and he gave it to himself. Like he wanted to be a guru. But I kept like pushing against his bullshit. And so
which is who you are naturally, like an annoying, what is it? Snarky, like, questioning, and like, you find you do that. And that's why you're such a great like co-host for this podcast, is because you just like, fuck you, anyways, I can see it. I would be annoyed by it too if I was trying to be a cult leader, but go on.
Well, I've embraced my snark since then. But at the time, so at first I was like, fists up and like, no. But then this wave came over me of like, I can't win this. And so my reaction was just to fall apart and start crying and be like submissive. So to get him away from me, to get him off my back. And it worked. Yeah. But I would always regret that later on, being like, oh, I let him win, air quotes. That's fawning, where I was just like, I knew that I had to just pretend like I was broken and like buying whatever he was saying. Oh yeah, I'm the one that's wrong.
Yeah, like he won. Like, oh, you are actually right. Like, yeah, you got me.
This podcast is brought to you by us, your friendly neighborhood cult busters.
Oops, I'm in an advertisement. If you'd like to support our efforts and access exclusive bonus content,
like behind the scenes conversations,
let's put this behind us.
Access to our research and more,
head over to Supercast, where you can subscribe monthly or yearly.
It's exclusive, it's personal, it's behind the scenes.
All about the Living Word cult.
Went to the records department trying to get filings for John Robert Stevens' divorce.
This is an unskippable advertisement.
Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode. This is a fun one. You should read this one because this was to you.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Well, this was from Fiona, who is a former Message follower.
The Message. Mm-hmm.
The cult, the Message in South Africa. I mean, it's global, but she's in South Africa, and she was a member of the Message, which was the William Branham cult that we talked about a little bit in John Robert Stevens' origin story episode. And I interviewed John Collins, who is a historian and researcher. Oh my God, Ziggy.
He doesn't like William Branham.
No, he doesn't.
Ziggy, come here.
And John Collins is a historian and researcher for who researches William Branham and among other things. And so we interviewed him, and this person responded to that. Fiona responded, and she said, I was in the Message from the ages of 4 to the age about 16 or 17. And most of my other siblings were born in the Message. I'm 35 now, but it is so weird how those cult residues stay with you for the rest of your life. It affected my life in such a negative way. I'm still dealing with the after effects of once being a Message believer and how radical my father made it. We were at the extreme end of the Message. So much so I found myself at 19 years old without a formal education and without a clue of how the outside world functioned. The motto in the household being God will provide. I can fortunately say with humility, I was able to pick up the pieces and make a comfortable life for myself. I now work as a software engineering team lead. To this day, though, the trauma is something that I and my siblings still deal with and ever so often need to attend therapy just to get rid of some of those deep-rooted beliefs that still haunt us at times. Oh my God. All this stuff I can relate to so much, where like every now and then you're like standing in a grocery store line, you have a thought, and then you're like, oh my God, that came from the cult. What am I doing still thinking that? Like still believing that thing. There's so many things. There's actually one that we're going to do an episode about that I texted you the other day about a worship song that I had. I was like, wait, what? Okay. So then she says, as a Black person in South Africa, it still baffles me how we ended up in the Message. I can say for sure that although the Message isn't outright and blatantly racist and has a lot of Black converts across the continent of Africa, the superiority complex that John Collins spoke about at the end of the podcast is a big thing within the church. A big example being how Black traditions and cultures are made to almost look demonic and evil. It almost felt like we were being saved from the barbaric ways we had known all our lives, the traditions that had flowed through our veins for centuries. Most of my family have left the Message cult, but a few still remain strong and steadfast. My father, although having left, is still dealing with internal conflict. He is still swayed by circumstances in his life. More so when things aren't good for him, he seems to think it's because of where he is at in the quote word. This Message thing has confused him so much, it has almost driven him mad. I think for him, it is like losing the love of your life because you have found proof that they misrepresented themselves, but you cannot come to terms with it. What people may never understand is that even after you leave, chances of going back and rejoining are so high, and just having that strength, determination, and ability to move on and build a new life from scratch takes courage. In closing, I would just like to say, please continue the good work. It is worth it, even if it touches one soul. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Fiona. It's so interesting, the parallels that are here, you know, like, I mean, it's like even the word and like all that stuff is like, it's the same kind of experiences and feeling. The thing that I think is really interesting in there is that like understanding how that cult going to South Africa, like scrubs out their culture.
Yeah.
You know, these things you said that like flowed through their veins for centuries. And this guy's cult came in and like trying to get rid of the quote barbaric ways.
So
that
awful.
it's really
Colonization.
awful. Yeah, it's the colonization, just like totally like wipe it out and whitewash it. Like we know the truth.
Yeah, and the
we
whole missionary.
know that like let's go across the world, find this culture, learn nothing about them, and then be like erase. You've been doing this for centuries, you say? Crazy. I got this idea from 5 years ago that I'm going to teach you, and that's going to be the truth now. You know?
Yeah, the whole missionary thing. It's just, and it's really sad because these are beautiful traditions, long-standing traditions that are deeply embedded in one's culture. And then someone comes along and says, no, you got it all wrong. And this is like demonic. And let me tell you.
Exactly. While we're on this topic of the message, I want to read a comment that we got. We got a lot of like really nutty comments on that
episode.
That episode, the William Branham talking to John Collins.
Yeah, two of which were like, William Branham is God.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Literally God, y'all.
Yeah. If you want to entertain yourself for a few minutes, like go load that video up and just read the comments. Cause the reason I want to say it is because like when I read this comment, I was like, and this is what you look like when you're a John Robert Stevens believer to the rest of us, to the rest of the world. This is what you look like. And here's the quote. I'm a 52-year student of the teachings of Jesus Christ through his servant, William Branham. In my 77 years, I've heard more than a few different opinions along the way. You are all welcome to believe what you like. But for me and those things I have seen about the man, William Branham, he truly is a man who loved God and holiness and was true to his calling more than myself. His accusers or anyone I know of these past 77 years by a long shot, I think he does this emoji, praise the holy name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It's just so like, you know, it just seems like much like, oh, that's what like, yeah, like just swap William Branham with John Robert Stevens. And again, yeah, like read a few of them, like Charity said, like some of them are a little nutty that are just like, William Branham is God. They're like dead serious too. It's not even like a joke.
It's wild. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of funny and goofy.
Oh my Lord.
Do you want to read this one or should I read this?
I do. I think I do.
This is another email we got. This was a long email that just like was a lot of ranting about their experience. And this was somebody that was a part of the Living Word. They were a long time ago and they left. They realized it was wrong and all that stuff, but they left and they sent us this like long thing about the technicalities of like what about John Robert Stevens' word did not sync up with the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll let Charity go ahead. What were you going to say?
I mean, I don't want this, like, if this guy's listening, I don't want him to be like, oh, they're like legit making fun of me. But I want to point out, I think, what is a blind spot for many men.
This has become a theme in our inboxes.
Yes.
Yes.
Like, well, I'll send an email signed Charity, and it's on behalf of the podcast, but then they'll write back, Dear Scott, or and it's just there's little things like that. A few examples, yeah, we'll get to those. But this was hilarious because after his long ranting email about the biblical technicalities of where JRS went wrong, he says, I heard you say, Scott, that you were also in the walk, and thankfully you're now out of it, and for quite a while now. Very good. But are you okay? Are you okay, Scott? I hope you have not abandoned your faith in the Bible. This gets to me. Okay, this gets to me.
It's very condescending, all of this stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it's like...
Are you okay?
It's like, what if I'm okay without the Bible? Is that not okay with you? Mm-hmm. Anyways, he goes on to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know where you are with your beliefs. Maybe in a good place. I'm hoping. I kind of think you're okay. I'm hoping that you still believe in Jesus and realize that he truly is the way, the truth, and the life. And this is the part where I called Scott and I was like, did you see this? And he's like, what? I missed that. And I'm like, he says, and I think the girl in your YouTube videos is your dear wife. Am I right? I hope she also understands who Jesus is. You guys, I'm not a co-host. I'm just the girl in Scott's YouTube videos.
She's not a co-host. She's not a woman. She's not Charity. She's the girl in my YouTube videos.
And I must be your wife because what other purpose would I serve?
Why would a man and a woman occupy the same space if they aren't married? That's nuts.
It's like, okay, sorry, bro. Like we're dragging you a little bit here, but did you hear our episode about misogyny?
Yeah, we wouldn't do this if it wasn't a theme. And
it keeps happening.
Yeah, and it's why we want to encourage people to send us emails and like share your experiences, no matter what they are. But like, come on, it's so disrespectful. It's so disrespectful.
There was another one where he was like, Scott, this is good work. And Charity, I hope your life keeps getting better.
That's what we really, that was that's again, like, these aren't like, I mean, I'll let Charity speak to it. I won't speak for you, like how offended you are by it, but like, it's just, there's obviously a blind spot here.
Yeah.
And Charity is my co-host on this. Like, we share in this. We do all the work together. She researches with me. We decide the structure and we record all of this stuff. We're like total 50-50 partners in all of this. So I appreciate that people are saying that they like the work, but like, Charity and Scott, please, in the future. Thank you very much. And Charity, I do hope your life gets better because Jesus Christ.
I mean, I'm able to laugh about it. I think it's funny because I've reached a level of like, I can have confidence in myself and in my value and what I do, but I just think it's funny. And it is a theme, I feel like, with men where they don't even realize it. Not all men, of course, but hear a lot of it.
Yeah, and I'm at fault plenty too. Like, I interrupt Charity often.
And I'll be like Scott, your patriarchal conditionings are showing. You're like, men just be out there menning all the time.
That's how we do it. What are these other, can we just we'll finish this up really quick because there's a couple other ones. So in the messages and emails, Charity gets hit on. She gets prayed for often, like Charity, we're really praying for you. Like, no mention of me. I don't need the prayers, apparently. And then the one where, you send the email from your address that says Charity Novelesi. Mm-hmm. You sign it Charity and Scott. And then the response back is, Dear Scott. And I had nothing to do with that email.
It's so comical.
It's so funny. Oh, man. Okay.
Love it.
All right. We ready?
Okay.
Continue.
Yeah. Do you want to read this next one? This is also
Sure.
a former San Diego church member.
Yes, let's do it. Okay. So there was a time when almost everyone knew me, but I barely spoke to anyone. I don't remember ever meeting Scott, but I spent so many feast services in that little band pit at CLW playing the trumpet and flute. Maybe you set up the mics back there and remember me looking uncomfortable at the time. I don't, because I think it was slightly different timing. I remember Charity from when I was sent to YASP against my will. My memories are of someone that always came across as cheerful and helpful and was chugging the Kool-Aid. See, these
Indeed,
are good. These are good, nice
that's
things.
such a great observation.
Truth.
I was chugging the Kool-Aid, admittedly.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry about all the crap you went through, and it was eye-opening to hear you talk about how bad it was for you. I never bought into any of it, but learning to say just enough in a vague way to get left mostly alone. I just showed up, played music, and then took off to surf. I never submitted anything to anyone. I mean, that sounds great. See, I wish I would have done that too.
I know. He had it right.
Yeah. They tried many times to get people more involved in my life, and I just ended up ignoring what they wanted me to do. As long as I could read books, study science, and do work with computers and music, I was okay. I do know some of why they started that McDougall diet bullshit, aside from the profit mongering of Maryland Farms. That diet also almost killed me in high school, which was less than enjoyable during one of the hardest times in my life.
Yeah, this
and
guy
then
is so
what did he
sweet.
say about? Hold on. Then he said one little thing about Gary Hargrave. It was
this
just,
was in his response when I asked him if we could read his email, and then he commented on the Gary's deposition episode, and we loved this one.
What did he say? What did he say?
that guy is more boring and slippery than a clump of mud. I really enjoyed this email. Like this guy, I remember him. I know who he is, and yeah. Thank you for this. You're great, and good job not chugging the Kool-Aid.
That's right.
Deep down, I was wanting to vomit out the Kool-Aid, but Anyway, do you know that I read recently that the giggling is like a trauma response?
What giggling?
When I giggle after I say something.
Oh.
I read that that's a trauma response.
To what? How? In what way?
It's kind of like, I need to look into it more, but I know how I feel inside is a lot of times it's like, I'm going to say what I really think, but then, like, don't hate me for it.
Yeah.
That's annoying. I'm starting to annoy myself.
Well, no, it's fun. I mean, I'm glad that, it fits our little like thing here so that we kind of keep things, but yeah, if you don't want to giggle, then don't giggle.
It's really hard not to.
In fact, we'll try and make the rest of the time without laughing.
Yeah, right.
There it goes. I kind of get that though. I understand the laughing. It's kind of like, you're saying something and you're worried about how it's going to like how people are going to respond to it. And so you laugh as kind of like, I said it, but then I'm also just laughing. So, don't take me too seriously here kind of thing. Yeah. It's like an apology in your own statement.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm rewinding to the comment about, I was just thinking too, maybe I shouldn't throw too much shade on that one comment about, good job, Scott. Charity, hope your life keeps getting better. I bet
it's really funny.
It is really funny. But then I was like, maybe he wrote that before he started the podcast, that guy, because maybe he just watched your interview with me. That was when you were still doing just the documentary shorts and you did the interview with me. And then we started the podcast later. So if he started with that could be like.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, you do almost every episode talk about like how terrible your life is and like how much like.
I do not.
No, I mean, I get that. I think like, especially like, you do have a lot of specific stories and general feelings towards the cult, and your experience growing up and stuff that like we've talked about before, where you really are, and I really don't mean to like, not in a belittling way at all, but like in a very like, supportive way, like you are resentful and not happy with like having to have grown up in that environment, which is totally understandable. Yeah. And now working through all of that stuff of like trying to like, how do I cat butt? How do I rebuild life? Like kind of like Fiona said at the end of hers, like rebuilding it from scratch.
Yeah.
Building a new life from scratch takes a lot of courage. Like that's the process that's happening now. And so like, yeah, it is nice. Yeah. And Charity, I hope your life keeps getting better. I mean, it is a nice thing. It's just funny put up like next to like, Scott, good work, Charity.
Yeah.
You'll get there.
I know. Yeah. That brings me to what I wanted to mention this, that I've been thinking so much lately since I was listening to the Snapping Out of It podcast, our sister podcast with Charlie and Mike, and they interviewed Evan Wolverton recently. It was such a beautiful interview. It's like 2 hours, and it went by so fast, and I wanted to hear more. But what it got me to thinking is like all the people we've talked to, and I'm referring specifically to the young people, like with those of us that were children growing up in this. The people that they've interviewed and the people that we've interviewed, and just, hearing Evan, I was just really like struck by how I feel like everyone is so impressive. Like everyone should be so proud of themselves because we have fought our way out of this stuff with little to no help from the adults that subjected us to it. In some cases, our parents are not, they're still even supporting JRS or Gary. In some cases, it's just like we've asked many adults in our parents' generation to come on the podcast, and they don't want to speak out. It's like we've done so much just on our own and I'm just really proud of everybody, like how far we've all come. And I just, I felt really touched by it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's a lot of like what, even just like look at like, if you just take Shalom's letters, she's somebody who grew up in this, and it took her yanking at the ears of the adults who were still a part of it and all of that, and turning, and just like that, just our whole, just all the younger generation being the ones being like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Get the attention of people who willingly joined it. Now, my experience, ever since Shalom's letters, I like truly hated everybody in the church. Like that had ever had anything to do with it. It wasn't like truly hated. It was just that,
But
like,
you got the ick when you would think about
I got
any
the
of us.
deep ick. Just the idea of seeing those, we've talked about this before, seeing familiar names. Even you were covered in the icky
Did I give you
grossness.
the ick?
Oh, of course. And like all of that, but like even pretty quickly in like turning around and like starting to do the work, it's even the older generation. I can think of specific people like where, I got the ick kind of comes from just the fact that like growing up in this thing, you kind of like, my parents would meet somebody at a feast service, all the churches come together for like a feast service. And so people are coming from here and coming from there, and they, somebody would be there and they'd be like, oh, we lived with this person back in Yakima in 19 Dickety, whatever, you know what I mean? And like all that stuff. And you're just like, ew, who's this person? Whatever, like all of that. And in revisiting this and talking and reopening things and talking about the experiences and really starting to redefine what this place was, a lot of that help has come from, sometimes anonymously on our podcast, sometimes just through messages, sometimes through emails, sometimes through actual interviews and all that stuff. Some of it does come from the older generation now turning around. Some of them have been working this for years, since before Shalom's letters. But like, I started to realize, I was like, and some of those people were the friends of like my parents. And now in seeing them today and seeing like people actually do the work of like re-examining their entire life and having to be like, I dedicated my life to this thing and it was wrong in this way, and giving us the information and sharing that stuff when it does show up, the people that have, because you're right, like plenty of people have turned us down, but those that have helped us, it has gotten me to the place where I'm just like, oh wait, I actually get it. People who are part of the Living Word are actually really interesting and really strong and really brave people.
Yeah.
And that's what narcissists do. That's what cult leaders do, is they find interesting, strong, smart, useful people, and they pull them in and they say, you're mine now. You're going to take all this talent and special like strength that you have, and you're going to give it to us. Yeah. And those that have been able to break that spell and turn around and say, I'm going to now use my strength for myself and I'm going to use it to help others. It's very inspiring to me. And it's starting to wash away that goo. All of this work for me is starting to be like, oh, I actually kind of like these people from the Living Word now.
Yeah, you're reminded
instead of
without the dissociation of the cult, who they are as a person. You're reminded of that, like, oh, I really like this person.
Yes, yeah. With the cult stripped away, or even use it, kind of just speaking the truth, even if it's about the cult or whatever. Like it's very inspiring, and it is really cool.
Yeah, just all of this stuff, and like Evan and Charlie and Mike, and then you and I have talked a lot about our journeys with therapy and all that. It's just all of the things that we've all done and tried in an effort to heal. That takes courage. That takes a lot of effort. It's like reading books, going to therapy, trying different, I think Evan was talking about a bunch of different books, and Charlie was talking about even like Evan and Charlie, like psychedelic therapy. I tried some of that. I did like therapy assisted drugs, psychedelic ketamine. Yeah. Stuff like that. It's just like our determination to get well. And
it's the looking at how you can just become stronger for yourself, how to heal yourself, instead of giving that to somebody else, instead of giving that to a cult and some bullshit mission, But like, how can I just do the basic stuff? And that's one of the hard things I think about all of this, is the like constant reminder that we have to like take care of ourselves first.
Yeah.
and that it is actually very important to do that instead of sacrificing everything for somebody else, which is
Yeah.
essentially what the
They were
cult's all
told to
about.
do. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, enough of my
Okay.
giant tangent.
No, I love it. It's perfect. We needed it.
Okay.
All right, we got a couple more. You want to get blast in there, Charity?
Yes. Okay. This is from another former member from long ago. Thank you for your stance. Thank you for your stance in exposing all this. In the mid 1970s timeframe, I was living in the Des Moines old big church house right next to the building where they held services, which was under construction at that time. I thought most of the youth around my same age group, 19 through 21, were really decent people with hearts of compassion. Some of them gave all their savings to the church. Even most of the elders at the church had good hearts. However, I heard about the unfaithfulness of John Robert Stevens and that all the women that he was involved with sexually were supposedly ministering unto him, quotes.
Mhm.
Us young people were told we had to check with the elders before we did anything. Example, went on vacation trips, college, bought cars, moved, etc. We used to ask the one elder we knew that would always give us the go-ahead. Smart. I left the church when 2 of my friends were treated badly. They gave them stiff condemnation. They went so far as to say that everything so-and-so touched caused a kind of death, even plants, and that he had a bad spirit. I left because of the way I saw them beat down my friends. Many years later, I found out that things got a whole lot worse after that. I left in the 1970s, and I have good memories of the Bobos. Remember Larry Bobo? We interviewed him,
Mhm.
and many others who had really good hearts.
Yeah.
Do you want to read the
that
second
thing
half?
of like, yeah, sure. That thing that like, everything they touch cause a kind of death. I mean, that's got to like leave a impact on you.
Right? If
One
you're
of those
told
things that gets in your head. Yeah. Okay. Then they go on to say, I was first attracted to the walk because of the great worship. I had been invited for a weekend in Des Moines from 2 women from our nurses training class of 1971. After one of the services, all 3 of us were given a word by the pastor and elder, and all three of us were to quit our RN nurse training and move to Des Moines to be a part of Bethel, which I guess is Bethel, a church
Bethel
or
Chapel?
something. Oh,
I
yeah,
think
Bethel
so.
Chapel.
Yeah.
We all did that, but when they told me to quit my job a few years later, I did not do that. All women were told to get their boyfriends checked out before dating, and I did not do that. And of the one serious relationship I had, he never went to a church service or met any church people except my closest girlfriend, who was abused emotionally by the elder and pastor. A number of us in our late teens would work cleaning grease ducks all night long for several fast food hamburger places, since one of the elders ran a kingdom cleaning business. Some of the work I was assigned, I was never paid for. And for a 19-year-old who was just getting started in life, that is just plain wrong. I was given the word to move in with an elderly woman who had cancer and take care of her. I never did that. There were a lot of things that just did not feel right to me. I moved to Des Moines to attend Bethel in 1973. I love the worship. And at the time, we would worship the Lord, not Marilyn. I let that change very quickly.
Yeah.
I love the people of my age group. They were the best and the closest friendship I had ever had. So it was really a big sacrifice to leave them when I left the church in 77. The leaders really tried to scare people into not leaving by saying bad things were going to happen to anyone that left.
I mean, if there's anything to take away from this, it's that this culture, it was like this from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I know people it did get more militant, but it's been the same bullshit from the beginning.
Needing the word and getting told to do things. You know, what's interesting is we have a little bit of like a survivorship bias in our letters and people that talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear from people like this who say, I was told to do this and I didn't do it. And I was told to do this and I didn't do it. Even you and I are a little bit rebellious in that respect. It's like the leadership told me to do this and I didn't do it. You're going to hear more from people that didn't follow the rules than you're going to hear from people that did follow the rules. Because if you did follow the rules, it's actually harder to know. I mean, like if it's a big thing, like you might chapter mark it in your brain. But if you're going along with the teachings of the living word, that's just your life and all the choices you've made in your life that were informed or directed by the shepherds. it's hard. It's going to be harder to parse that out. This is my opinion. I think,
Yeah.
you know, the survivor bias is essentially, the best illustration of it is World War II planes. The fighters would go out, they'd fight, 15 planes go out and 10 come back. And so they look at all the holes in the planes and they're like, oh man, the plane got shot here and it got shot here and it got shot here. We better put armor on all these spots that it got shot. But what they weren't realizing is those planes survived. If those planes came back and they were shot there, that means that plane is perfectly fine being shot there. And you need to armor up the spots where it wasn't shot, because the planes that got shot in those spots were the ones that went down. And so it's a survivor bias. It's kind of, they also say it with dolphins, like you always hear these stories about dolphins that save people out at sea. No, dolphins play with people out at sea. You're hearing stories from the ones that got pushed to shore instead of the ones that got pushed further out to sea and killed by the dolphins. And so it's a survivor bias. And I think we see that a lot. I'm just recognizing that, like, we hear that a lot from people, even in our interviews, where people are like, oh, they told me to do this and I didn't do it. You know what I mean? And I think we're just hearing more from people that are naturally rebellious and have a little bit in there. We've definitely heard from people who followed the teachings of the shepherds, the directions of the shepherds, and how that affected them. But
I think
anyways,
I think for many of us, it's just like back and forth. That's like, I would be rebellious and then I would chug more Kool-Aid, and then I'd be rebellious and chug more Kool-Aid. And it was like the back and forth internal conflict always for me. And I kind of wonder if that's sort of a theme among all of the people that
I think for sure. But I think even having that conflict is enough that you're recognizing it,
Yeah. It takes so long though to actually accept. I was telling you the other day how, like, I get embarrassed when people ask me, like, how old were you when you left the cult? And I'm like, 39, because you say you grew up in a cult and they assume like you left when you got to be an adult. And I'm like, no, I mean, it took me 10 years to leave. 10 years, really, in all honesty.
10 years of questioning, of actively. Yeah. Similar. So similar for me. It took me years of like slowly just distancing myself. I don't know about 10 years, but like,
It's like that Homer Simpson meme where he slowly like
into the bushes. Exactly.
Regresses into the bushes.
Exactly. That's right.
Okay. Should we move forward?
Yeah, this one's yours.
Okay. So this guy writes in and says, I just wanted to reach out to let you know I found your podcast, and what can I say? I'm enthralled by it and impressed at what the two of you have done with this podcast. He says, the two of you. Thank you, sir.
Yay.
He's a man. It's incredibly brave what you're doing, and yet so unbelievably important. I was born into the church and went to the church school in LA. I left the church when I was in high school when they shut the school down to get it accredited, and I feel that it absolutely changed my life for the better, even though it was hard at the time. I went to a public high school and never looked back. While I appreciated the teachers, I hated going to school there and felt a freedom when I went to a public high school that I had never felt before. Fast forward to now, I've been running my own business for the last 9 years and have a wonderful wife and 2 children. I had a pretty successful life up to this point, and I know that I wouldn't have had this if I hadn't left in my teenage years and hadn't gone to therapy literally for years to move on from the cult. It was hard. Hearing these stories of those abused in the church has been unbelievably heartbreaking. I never knew about the abuse that was going on, even though it was apparently happening all around me. Like you, Scott, I was a part of the TLW clan by working in the booth, and my home church was CLW, so I was able to go to both. The closest I came to the abusive nature of all of it was knowing that Rick and third wife were hanging out in the side room up there while he was married to second wife, but I trained myself to just ignore it. I was recording the word of God. I had a job to do. So relatable.
Yeah.
So many mixed memories and stories that I still tell to this day of how my designated relationships ruined my relationships while I was there. And looking back on it now, it was all about control. And man, am I so glad to be out of it. I am jealous of people that left so young. But like you always tell me, I probably wouldn't be doing this if I had left.
I know. I'd be all alone.
No, we don't want that.
That's what I think is really interesting about this is how like you did say, like, I left and then I've had like a really great life.
Yeah.
you know,
Which is the
by-
opposite of what they always said that would happen to us. Like
Yes,
if you left,
right?
they'd say you're going to have a shit life and
That's
bad
right.
things are going to happen to you.
So what? Thank you
Thank you.
for writing
For
all these letters.
yeah.
We really do appreciate it. I hope we didn't make fun of you guys too much.
We did. But like mostly we were accolading. Is that
Yes.
is that a verb? Accolading?
Accolading? Yeah, I don't know.
Like give
Well,
accolades.
we'll go with it. Yes. Yes. My education says yes.
Your cult education.
We actually really like getting these. We don't go through them very often because it's a lot to do, but we really like doing these letters from the listeners because it's just like these little windows into little stories that are very interesting and very fun. We appreciate the positive feedback too that we get in these emails. If you find yourself desiring to tell us how much you like the podcast, go to the review section of the podcast on Spotify or an Apple and write it there. That actually helps, I think, from what I understand, that helps people find it. Like on the podcast platforms, you can comment on the YouTube videos, like say nice things there. The emails are fine. But like our egos are already doing great. Like you can pump us up.
We can't get enough because we're traumatized youths. It's like you just all of the nice things. It's like a bag with holes. They just fall right through. So keep them coming. We're working on it. We're in therapy. It's fine.
Yeah, love the emails with the stories. It's really great.
Keep sending us the
stuff
that your experiences and the things that the dirt on leaders, all that stuff. But any kudos you want to give to the podcast, please do so publicly because it really does help.
Yes.
Also, if you want to shit all over us publicly too, I mean, that's your prerogative.
Really, anything, all things drive engagement. So just anything, write your controversial comments down in the YouTube section. Leave like really controversial comments. If you're going to be sexist, if you're going to be a misogynist, like comments, please.
Get ready to be trolled. I love it.
Thanks for listening to Oops, I'm in a Cult.
Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Follow us on Instagram at Oops, I'm in a Cult Podcast.
Support us on Supercast by visiting our website at oopsiminacult.com to subscribe and receive exclusive bonus content.
Or email us at oopsiminacult@gmail.com.
Take it easy and don't join a cult. If you or someone you know has a mental illness, is struggling emotionally, or has concerns about their mental health, there are ways to get help. Use the resources linked in the description to find help for you, a friend, or a family member.